Awesome. All right, it's 2 after. It looks like we have a decent amount of attendees in. So we're going to get started. Thank you again, everyone, for joining today for the 2026 Trends that are Shaping the Future of Supply Chain and Specification Management webinar. Today, we will be speaking with Matthew Wright, Mike Bosey, Pratik Lal, and Michelle Carvel. I will pass it now to Matthew, who will intro our agenda and speakers.
Great. Thank you, Kennedy. Excited to be here. We got an amazing panel, which we'll get to in a minute, and I'll get everybody to introduce themselves. But we're going to cover really 4 different trends that we were talking about today. And as we go through these trends, we'll go kind of deep into where we see things are at today and really where they're trending in the future. But trend number 1, it will be building strong data foundations. I'll be spending some time on that with Mike. And trend number 2, leveraging AI for better business outcomes. And that'll be Mike and Pratik and all of us kind of joining in. Trend number 3, certainly top of mind, sustainability, EPR and PPWR, and certainly pulling Michelle into those conversations. And then trend number 4, building a connected and visible supply chain, which is an area I'm really excited about. We'll be having a conversation with that with Pratik. And then we'll talk about kind of what we see going forward. And then we'll wrap up with some good announcements. So with that, I'd love to introduce the panel. It's not only friends, but great cohorts to the space. Matthew Wright, the founder of Specright and executive chairman, and happy to introduce or have Mike introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Mike Bosey joined Specright back in March and am now partnering with Matthew in terms of leading Specright, and I really appreciate everyone joining us.
Great thought leader in the space and a good ally. And Pratik, love you to introduce yourself. If you could grab can't hear you, Pratik, sorry.
What can I say? We started off with a rookie move. Listen, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me. This is going to be quite a great webinar and some really important topics. By way of introduction, my name is Pratik. And I founded a Adept group early on in my career after kind of seeing the same pattern over and over again, which is talented teams working really hard, but lacking the resources and systems they needed to be successful doing innovation, sustainability, cost, and compliance. And so we built Adept Packaging to really change that. And we're focused on making packaging professionals more successful by giving them the right expertise and resources and softwares to do their job. And over the last 18 years, we've been trusted by more than 300 different companies, delivering over $100 million of services, with 94% of that actually being to repeat customers. And today, my role is really leading our nationwide team of packaging engineers to help our clients succeed. And what I'm really excited to be here for today is to share our experience and learnings, particularly around data, packaging data, sustainability, EPR. So thank you for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Great to have you, Pratik. And Michelle, I won't go into the background story, but we're really glad to have you here and love for you to introduce yourself.
Thanks very much for having me. A pleasure to be here on webinars with you guys, as always. My name is Michelle. I am based in the UK. I work at a company called Larix EPI, and we help businesses to go through the process of EPR reporting, which has certainly become a hot topic over the last probably 18 months, particularly in the US. And my day job really is making sure that the customers that we start working with understand the data needs for EPR and also help them get that end-to-end integration and then bring through and be able to do reporting. Also, we spend a lot of time at the moment really helping companies actually just try to understand that landscape of EPR. Are they obligated? And how is it really going to affect them long-term in terms of projects like fees and source reduction? And I actually kind of just been doing this my whole life. So I don't know much else just about EPR legislation.
Yeah, great to have you, Michelle. And I think just in general, the challenges of companies and corporations in front of us and people is so great. And I hopefully the comfortability of this team and many others are there to help all of you through these challenges resonates. And so as we go into the agenda, Again, we talked about kind of trend number one, building a strong data foundation. And obviously this is a section that's really near and dear to me as really the foundational value as we talk to kind of click through many of the other outcomes like AI or EPR, PPWR reporting, and definitely through connected supply chain. Really the start of it all is a strong data foundation. And what it means is connecting kind of the DNA of product. And we've talked obviously at Specright about this a lot. And then Ken, if you go to the next slide, we talk about kind of the breakdown and digitizing and the value of the data at a very granular level, the DNA of product and packaging. And this has really become more and more critical as we really talk about connecting technology through AI and other tools. When we talk about reporting on sustainability and just regulatory and compliance in general, again, this data foundation is very important. And it's not just any data, it's very critical identified data that's part of this process for all of these trends. And so, Mike, I know you've joined Specright recently and certainly have become a fast follower and lived around data your whole life. What are your thoughts around specification management and the criticality of it?
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Yeah, it's interesting if you think about food and beverage, other fast-moving consumer goods. You think about anything packaging. The spec sort of is the business. The spec is foundational to the company, and so the notion that this super critical, mission critical data might not be centralized, might not be accessible. It's, sort of makes your head spin. And so, now with the tools we have available, we'll talk about AI and how that's accelerating this trend. We have this great opportunity to bring it together in a centralized fashion, make it super manageable, modifying, creating, cloning. And then, we'll talk too about the different use cases and value that you can drive. And, I know on the next slide, we talk about all of the various functions that can leverage the spec data. So you think about quality operations, R&D. Now it's also spiked, and Michelle's going to talk about it, as regulatory reporting. So you need that atomic level data for Oregon, California, Colorado, PPWR. And then there's a third use case, which we'll also talk about, which is AI. And so if you have accurate atomic level product and packaging data, that's going to allow you to fully leverage AI. You can't leverage AI without it. And so just the value of centralizing, digitizing, making it accessible is just being amplified with these other trends.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant. The other part of the data structuring is data and the criticality of data. And Mike talked about the atomic or really detail-oriented information through the whole process. But it's also how you have that data managed. And management, true live data is not shared sheets or Excel files. That's dead data. You have to have this data live, have it accurate, and as you see the diagram on the right, have everybody living off that set of data. To the left, you're ripe for versioning controls. You're ripe for missing data, bad data. We've done a lot of studies where this data is supplied in 200% different spots, meaning it's multiple spots of this data. So which one's accurate, which one's right? The world's moving so fast, and AI doesn't understand that data structure. So it's got to be the right data, structured the right way, and accessible in the right manner. And I know, Pratik, you have stories about good and bad data. Anything you'd like to share? Then you're on mute.
I'm happy to hear that this is the first trend we're talking about, because it's easy to kind of brush this, brush it aside and move on to other things. But when we talk about trends, this is a very significant trend for the packaging and supply chain function. And if we were to look at it on a trend line, and look at it from 10 years ago to a couple of years ago to today and where it needs to go, it's really objective backwards, right? Like, what is the goal? What is the objective that we're trying to, that we need to meet? And in the past, packaging specifications were important, and they were important to operate the business, to know what to buy, to know what to put in a BOM, and those kinds of things. Still really important. As we look at the future, the needs for accurate, complete packaging specifications are much more comprehensive, right? And like both of you were saying, it is to operate the business with a level of efficiency. It's also to be able to drive compliance, like what Michelle, I'm sure, is going to talk a little bit more about. There's reporting, there's compliance. We need the packaging information to be able to do that. And then it's to extract value from digital technologies like AI. AI uses the currency of data to provide, to do the work and to provide insights. So no data, no output. And this is a really important aspect. So where this went from being a nice to have, as we look to the future, this is becoming a very critical component and a must have. And I wonder if you guys have the same kind of opinion about this,
Yeah, Michelle, any thoughts before we move on to the next section? I know you and I have talked a lot about this over time.
Yeah, I mean, I can just give you a perfect example of how important this live type of data has been, even over the last 3 or 4 months. When reporting was required for California only last month, businesses were required to go back to 2023. And they needed to go back to 2023 to be able to set a baseline. And the baseline is important because from the baseline, they're meant to be able to show improvement and change. So when companies don't have that ability to, at a touch of a button, be able to use the today data as it is live, to be able to go back in time, to be able to see what the difference is between those two data time points, the business isn't able to show that easily or in a simple way. And so we really had a lot of trouble creating this because, of course, companies want to be able to say, look, I've made some great gains in the last 2 years in terms of packaging. We've changed design, we've lightweighted, we've put in PCR. They were only able to do that by almost taking 2 static data sets, maybe a spreadsheet that someone had from 2 years ago, comparing and contrasting offline. And so really that ability to have live data at the touch of a button at your hand whenever you need it, and to be able to see change is so important from a regulatory perspective. But also as companies move forward, they want to show progress. They want to show what they've done and achieved. And you need to have that in a single place at a single point in time. So yes, it's been a huge problem for businesses over the last few months.
No, thank you, Michelle. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say there's maybe one other aspect to this, which is the how. So if we all agree we want to do it, how do we do it? And we've gotten better, right? There's a learning curve that the industries have gone through. You can think about pushing it back to the spec owner. You need to go digitize it. You need to work through that. Sometimes you want third-party help, and sometimes that can be lower cost resources. Sometimes that can require packaging expertise. So there's a spectrum of third party. And then, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, but I can't curb my enthusiasm. AI is a great way to digitize specifications. And so, Michelle, Lorax, and Specright, we have a great example of a very large retailer over a 3-month period digitizing literally tens of thousands of specs and SKUs in order to meet their organ reporting requirements. So I think the other message is it can be done, and it can be done a lot faster and cheaper with the infrastructure that's been built out, and now AI to augment that as well.
No, thanks, Mike. Actually, as we move into the next topic, I wanted to wrap up with exactly kind of what you said, which is, I'm always, I have terrible analogies, most people know that, but I love the concept of Sherpas and the whole guiding concept. And that's really what's available today. I think if I showed up to the mountain, they'd probably have 3 Sherpas show up to help me. But, everybody needs a different varying degree of resourcing, as you were just saying, Mike, and that's available today. So there's really not, we have to do it. Also, there's not an excuse because enough people have done it in all different methods and manners to do that. So as we move to the next topic, I know, let Mike really drive this as you're close to AI and kind of where you're leading the charge with Specright in the category. So Mike, love for you to take this part.
Yeah, well, I love this title. It's really about business outcomes. If you fast forward 2 slides, there's just so many great use cases for AI that are very tangible. We're working with several clients on, the business case for AI, the ROI for AI, but it's very robust. I would summarize this kind of in 4 areas. There's something very interesting with AI around the speed and the user experience. If you think about modifying a spec and the sort of classic features that you go through and the clicking, why not use a prompt? Why not ask, I want to modify this particular box, modify this particular formula, and it will modify it. So it's really jumping to the answer, leveraging AI. Automation is another sort of obvious one. So if you think about collaborating with a vendor for a COA, to modify a specification, to provide me a specification, an agent can do that on your behalf. And that's something that, we have a capability coming in the first half of next year. You think about insights, making recommendations. So on your behalf, I think you should change out this particular ingredient, change this particular adhesive, pricing, supply chain disruptions. And then the one that gets really interesting, which typically software hasn't necessarily helped with, is creating or innovating. So I want to think about a new nutritional bar. I want it to be high protein, low calorie, crunchy, splash of chocolate. Boom, there's the formula, and it's going to accelerate your time to the lab. So the use cases for AI, right? When we talked about software, it was often about just automation, maybe some analytics. We really have this much broader opportunities, broader set of business outcomes that we can go after. And then if you think about some of the conversation we were just having, right, it starts with that, clean, digitized, accurate data. And then we, are using this thing called AI to drive a set of those outcomes. When we think about it, if you jump to the outcome side, there's this great opportunity for digitization, which I was highlighting earlier. There's that notion of insights and a better user experience. So instead of classic features and classic search, it's prompt and AI search. And then there's taking actions. There's agents that are doing things, and we'll talk about how they does it in the right way, in a thoughtful, trusted manner. But if you jump back just quickly to that AI, what do we mean by AI? Large language models, rightfully so, get a lot of attention. And we are certainly leveraging them as kind of a foundational engine. But there's a couple other things that are going on within artificial intelligence. So when we're solving for agents and modifying a spec, we also need to think about something called context engineering or prompt engineering. And so you just don't feed large language models datas or a simple prompt. You want to make sure that they are grounded in the right information. So you'll hear this term context engineering, but it's really about what should the model know right now to answer or solve that particular problem. And then you hear about prompt engineering. It's about how do you speak to the model. So those are 2 sort of areas of science and engineering that really brings this alive. And I just wanted to highlight that it's not just ChatGPT in the middle, throwing data at it. There's a lot more science that needs to take place. And if you just quickly move to the next slide here on what do we mean by trust layer or AI principles? Well, first is choice. If it's something you don't want to turn on, you don't turn it on, giving you that flexibility and configuration. having it on the same platform that your security teams have reviewed, your IT teams have reviewed, super critical, super foundational. And then it's the human assist, it's the human engagement, it's the human in the workflow that has to be part of your AI strategy. Sometimes you will let agents take action on your behalf. Oftentimes, you're going to want to make sure that that human is making the final call. And so just those simple principles need to be part of your AI strategy as part of our product strategy. And then if you just go to the next slide to be more specific on capabilities, I think on slide 10, you'll see that this digitization can cover many areas. If you go to slide 10, that can be digitizing specs, that can be COAs, any of the documentation in and around specifications. We can leverage AI to help move that from a PDF to a digitized format. On the insights, it's really twofold. It's about just a fundamentally different, better, faster user experience. But then it's also lifting relevant information at the time that you need it, the time that it makes sense. So if there's a regulation that's associated with that particular spec, let's surface that, for example. And then just very quickly, this term agents gets used a lot. And from our world within specifications, there's a spectrum. Sometimes it's something very simple where an agent is recommending that modification, that change in ingredient. Then there's also this notion of what we like to think of as a workbench. You're literally sitting down, leveraging AI tools to create a new product, to make a significant modification, to re-engineer a product. And so it's literally the workbench. It's the place where you're going to design and create. And so the term gets used a lot of different ways. The most simple notion is taking actions, but there's also just a fundamentally sort of uber agent in terms of that specific job function.
I was thinking, Pratik, I know if you could have a few quick comments. I know you're working around the spaces. I think we all are. Love to get your insights on how you think the intersection of AI and supply chain transparency is going forward today.
I think along the lines of everything that Mike said, AI is definitely the next frontier, and it's here today. And it's a technology where if we don't, we really need to master it and have it work for us. And so within the packaging and supply chain space, one of the areas where, so we recognized this a little while ago when we built out a AI development team. And as our clients came to us and explained to us some of their needs, one of the things that they started saying was, 10 years ago, we had 2 packaging regs. Today, we've got about this huge stack of packaging regs, and it keeps growing. And it's taking my people days every month to just stay current and up to date with it. And so what we did was we took that, really internalized it, and built a AI software around it. And that is a software that is now available for everybody in packaging and in the sustainability world to be able to subscribe to today. And that, is one great example of being able to get a tremendous amount of efficiency and accuracy by using technology that is no longer, science fiction. It is available today. It works really well. It meets all the requirements. And so we welcome folks to come reach out and learn about Adept EPR AI. And work with Specright and the rest of the team to integrate these things and drive efficiency and accuracy.
Thank you, Pratik. And as we jump to the third trend, I'm going to leave lean heavily on you, Michelle, as obviously a space that you're very familiar with. Obviously the trends today, I think everybody's well aware, EPR and PPWR. Again, if you're listening from the US, maybe not as familiar with PPWR, and I know you can touch on that, Michelle.
Yeah.
But if you move forward a slide, and we'll just sit here for a minute, I think we all know just tremendous, as we started the whole program out, tremendous pressure that we've never really experienced before. We never really had to go back multiple years to restate what we had done years ago, or we really didn't have to have a great visibility into the future of products that we can and can't use. So high complexity coming towards us. Michelle, I'd love for you to speak on, in general, what you see from the trends perspective, not only kind of today, but where you think this is headed, and what the experiences you're having with customers out there today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. A few years ago, packaging data reporting, so to speak, was a simple beast. It was let's see how much paper, plastic, metal that we've got kicking around, and if we can work out some numbers, it will. And you put something in, then you'll be in good stead, and you will put yourself ahead of the curve. But what we're really seeing now, with the increase of legislation coming across the US states and the packaging and packaging waste regulation, which really is almost the EU's own version of the California legislation, but then split out into 27 countries, we're really seeing that the requirements for granularity of data are exponentially larger than they've ever been before. It's never going to be enough anymore just to know that you're using a bit of plastic. You have to go down to the very detailed level of material lamination layers, additives, coatings, disruptors to the recycling process. And most European countries will be moving towards a method of determining packaging recyclability by looking at that very granular level. Is a label attached to a bottle when you actually get to the point of throwing it away? And those types of things then are pieces of data that no one holds in the PLM system. This isn't something that exists already, which is why there's this whole new world of having a real specification for a piece of packaging for your product, which has never really had the interest that it's had before. And if you combine that simply with the fact that there's a need to report in more detail, with the incoming modulation that happens in fees, and modulation in fees really means that if you're doing a good job and you've designed packaging well and it's easily recyclable, you will pay a lower fee. But if you haven't, and you have packaging which is difficult to collect and manage and reprocess and sort, then you will be inevitably charged a higher fee. But you do need to know a lot of information to accurately classify your packaging. And that's where the modulation is starting to hit companies, because where we probably used to have quite simple fee models, so to speak, we now have very complex fee models that are not even just driven by data, they're also driven by the recycling process in the market. And so you have to have this very wide set of data about each individual product, each individual packaging component, and how they interact with each other, in order to take advantage of the fact that they are offering lower cost if you can prove it, but you have to be able to prove it with really good data.
Yeah, if you click forward, kind of the next slide, Mike, I know you spent a lot of time with customers and a lot of discussions. You'd mentioned the retailer a 90-day kind of efficiency rate. I'd say I'm just curious what trends you're hearing from brands and private label retailers that's relevant to kind of the trends and how they're managing the thought process going forward.
Yeah, we certainly kind of have interest on three fronts. One is exactly what Michelle is talking about with the EPR legislation and addressing compliance. Mm-hmm. The other one is around AI, and literally there's AI budgets and people wanting to experiment or scale, and we can come back and talk about that. Then the other trend or driver that we're seeing with our business is, okay, now I've got the data centralized and digitized. What are all the things that I can do with that data, both sort of from a new product development perspective or quality perspective, but also from an integration perspective. We are very busy integrating with other systems. and those other systems and those associated business processes are getting leverage from the spec data. So kind of not kind of the drivers and the things that we're seeing with our customers certainly fall into those three areas.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We talk a lot about EPR and PPWR, Michelle, and obviously that's the US and broader Europe. But what other kind of, we say, global regulations, what else do you see coming on the scene in the future? Any insights on how much more complexity is coming?
Well, I mean, in Europe, there is a whole raft of Green Deal legislation which looks at bringing in potentially carbon accounting and looking at cross-border movement of goods and restriction of plastics. And we also see bans on certain materials. EPR now has not just simply turned into reporting about packaging, but you also have to be able to demonstrate good design principles. So part of the PPWR legislation is to show, for example, minimization in packaging and make sure that you're not over packaging something. So your data doesn't simply need to just be able to report what I've done for a number and a cost, but you also need to be able to show that ability to have improvement and also to be able to monitor other design factors, not simply the fact that you just made packaging and sold it through whatever means. And don't forget, we focus a lot on North America, we focus a lot on Europe, but EPR now is a global problem. And we have EPR legislation through many APAC countries. Australia is now going through another overhaul of legislation. We have South Africa, we have other African nations picking up EPR legislation, as well as South America. So even if we get to a point where we're sort of able to cope with the raft of legislation coming in just from North America and Europe, we still have then got new and emerging programs, and those programs keep getting this new level of complexity. No one's coming in with let's have a look at something simple. They're all coming in with design statistics, bans on materials, minimization standards, recyclability analysis. And so it's no one's starting from zero anymore. They're having to start from this level of knowledge, which other countries have had. Now they've put in EPR programs, and also because they want to get good returns as well. And so we are seeing that the legislation is not just a North America and Europe problem, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and I think one of the trends, and I'm sorry, Mike?
I was just going to ask Michelle a quick question.
Yeah.
How much are you seeing where it's only reporting and we just have to get the reporting done versus starting to think about optimizing and reducing fees, reducing waste, more recyclability with your client base? What are you seeing with those two sort of ends of the spectrum?
I would have said even up to about 6 to 8 months ago, we were still seeing companies coming at this with the attitude of, I just got to get it done. I've got a report to do. I need to find the numbers. I need to put something in. I'll pay the fee. But the California legislation really has had a big knock-on effect of how companies are really looking at that. Number one, of course, it's hugely expensive. So every single finance department is looking at how they can save some money. But second of all, they have this concept of source reduction. And source reduction means that whatever they're doing today, they have to be able to show a 25% improvement in reduction of plastic. And so companies are now absolutely addressing this by saying, thank you for the baseline. I've made that now, but now how can I use this data to see where my real problem areas are? How can I see which products have got the highest cost for me, which products have got the highest plastic impact for me, and they're the ones which they will now want to use that data and then go and target improvement. So it's vitally important because without that, you can't do it. And we've had plenty of companies who this is really brand new for them. They don't have packaging data. They don't have the information. They've gone ahead with EPR in the US with maybe average BOM methodology, or they've sort of had to make data up because they're able to weigh a few sample products and then extrapolate it. And that isn't going to be enough when they then have to show how they've improved because they didn't really ever have a very good baseline to improve from. So you're right that actually over time we're really seeing that shift change. It's being driven by the legislation. California has their own version of this, but as I say, Europe also has the minimization that they have coming through too, and that's going to have a similar impact.
Yeah, one thing that I'd said over time, Pratik, to you is I think Adept, and you did a good job on the introduction of that's just the natural muscle that Adept has for different purposes. And applying that today to what Michelle just shared, because I do think that's the next horizon that's in front of us. What are you seeing, and how do you go about helping companies, reduce their footprint in general of packaging?
So this is a really good question, and want to sort of build on what Michelle is saying. She's spot on in that, the first step, there's a progression here. The first step is you need to have the information, right? You need to have the packaging data. And the second step is then you need to know how to do the reporting. You need to know the regs and be able to put that reporting together. The third step is then you need to be able to make your packaging better. And this third step is not as simple as saying, just put some recycled content in. It's easy to say that. It's easy to say, optimize it, make it smaller, or make it recyclable. These are kind of really broad, easy things to say. They're really difficult to implement. In this year, we've probably worked with over 40 clients who at each client we're working on developing their packaging to make it better for the environment. And so we're working with, for example, one of the largest beverage companies in the world, looking at their entire portfolio to add recycled content into their plastic bottles and caps. As you can imagine, if you're making 100 bottles of soda a day, that takes a certain level of sophistication. But if you're making 40,000 of them a minute, that's a completely different kind of sophistication that you need in order to do that without impacting and breaking down the whole operating flow of things. The same with one of the largest snack companies, where we're working on changing from a multi-layer film structure to a single material film structure, and to pick one that's recyclable. Same things with working on distribution packaging, changing from plastic to paper. And some of these changes and there's a huge variety of range in terms of complexity. Some of them do take months of development, months of validation, months of commercialization to actually get right. Some of them might be much faster. And so there's this entire body of work that most companies are now going to have to focus on doing if they want to make their packaging more sustainable. And I wonder if I, bring Michelle back up and say, is it really a choice, Michelle? Can they choose to not do this? Or is it kind of an inevitability? Like, they're going to have to do it. The question is really like how much opposition they're going to create in getting there.
Yeah. And, again, legislation is really pushing this because they, on some level, don't have a choice. In the US, in California, packaging which is not considered recyclable will be banned in 2032. And packaging which is not considered recyclable in Europe will be banned in 2030. So there are some really big milestones coming up where companies aren't going to have the choice to decide we're not going to do anything about it. We'll just pay the cost and get on with it. Or in some cases, maybe even not pay the cost. But there is no way around this now. The legislative push to try and really make this, and I think it has to be there. We've had EPR for 30 plus years, and it probably hasn't had that kind of drive that I guess maybe companies wanted it to, or business or countries wanted it to. So this is why we see the legislation now becoming so stringent. But those bans are real, and they will be monitored in both, one of the biggest, the biggest state in the US and the biggest landmass over here in the EU, because that's going to be 27 countries all acting the same.
And Kent, thank you. And Kennedy, as we move to section number 4, I heard Mike, he sits about 2 hours south of Sacramento. He's going to go take care of all this for everybody and straighten out the state. But bearing that that's not going to happen, we do have to address it. And I think that's what Pratik and Michelle are saying is, we can no longer, and I love what you said earlier, Michelle, just everybody's kind of thinking it's just a reporting. One thing I talk about is in industry is we always look at projects. Everything's been a project for my whole career. It's got a beginning and an end, and then you move on to the next project. And this is not a project. This is a continuum that will be part of just operating businesses going forward. And the adjustment from I just need to report to, no, this is my business structure going forward. And I keep saying the regs are going to change again. So, this was banned today. Something's going to be banned tomorrow that may have been that replacement. So it's very complex. And we're going to move in for time's sake into trend number 4, building connected and visible supply chain. This is an area that I'm really excited. I think we talk a lot about the challenges that businesses have today, but I'm actually, I think, getting more excited because if we really adjust our thinking and the way we react and operate to these challenges and change the business outcomes, it really is going to lead to areas that Mike was talking about, which is very proactive, thinking ahead and creating products differently than we have historically. If you move, click forward, I think we talked a little bit about this, Pratik, but I know in the space of supply chain and how these interconnected parts come together, we talked about a lot of them. There's a lot that we haven't talked about, but we certainly talk about product development. Mike was talking about that a little bit in product itself. Then we talk about launching it. We talk about maturity, which is a lot of where we're at today, and then we'll talk about obviously phasing out or changing. I'd ask you, Pratik, because in your business structure, you really look at that whole life cycle of a product, and then now we've introduced this complexity of interrupting that life cycle unnaturally for reasons of, as we just mentioned, for sustainability reasons. How are you seeing this handled today, and what do you see for the future? And how does it take into account the things you mentioned, which is now taking into account the whole sustainability efforts? Oh, you're on mute again. Oh, there you go.
There you go. This is a really good question, because for the folks that are listening in and thinking about this, this is a topic to give a little bit of thought to. The way that we develop products, and even more specifically packaging in the past, was you needed partners, right? You needed supply partners, but you could have a relationship where you were one hand removed. Keep them outside your doors, keep them away, and have a separation. As we look at what needs to be done in the future, and what it will take to actually not just develop it, but then to supply it, and supply it with the kind of quality assurance that is needed for this kind of high volume commodities, this is the topic that becomes a really important one, where you do need to have an integration with your supply partners in the supply chain. And the integration has to be on needs to be on multiple levels. There needs to be a data level integration. There needs to be an operating and development process integration. There needs to be a supply level integration. And through these integrations and vertically integrated partnerships and relationships will come the kind of development that we're going to need in order to continue to meet sort of the regulatory landscape, as well as the changing consumer and their expectations. So the one example I give is, when you're a brand, you think about reporting, and you think about it within the confines of your organization. Imagine being the supplier and getting requests for information, not from one of your customers, but from all of the thousands of customers, all syndicated, sent to you in different ways, right? Some are emails, some are spreadsheets, some is a portal, some is a phone call, and they all have a different data ask, a packaging information ask. Imagine replying and responding to all of these. And now imagine having to do this every year. That is a Herculean task for the supplier, and something they didn't have to do before. So this will require partnership. You can't expect them to just be able to do this. And if you want them to do it for you, you have to build that partnership with them. So just as an example,
No, it's great. And if Ken, if you jump to slide 22, I'd like to sit on the slide for a second and really throw it back to Mike for a minute. Mike, you talked about earlier, integrations, connectivity, and Pratik, you just did. I'd like you to paint a little bit of a picture of how you see the connectivity happening, and I guess what you're seeing today, and then where you see it going.
Yeah, I like what Pratik was saying. I think this notion of the extended enterprise 360 view of your supply chain robust collaboration. These are all sort of buzzwords that get used, but we need more and more of that. If you have to collect and interact with your vendors in completely different ways, whether that's for regulatory purposes, supply chain agility, right? We went through the pandemic and we all got a shot in the arm on our need for resilience and agility. And so just at a sort of thematic strategic level, those are the things that we're unlocking. If a CEO is interested in those types of things, I would throw speed of innovation. Virtually every conversation we're having with customers, time to innovation, time to value, new product development throughput. How can we be faster? And then there's another boring aspect to this, which is IT consolidation. It's always sort of been a trend, but having 200 SaaS applications isn't working for CIOs anymore. And so implied in this picture, I would argue, is IT simplification, IT cost reduction is also another value driver that we're having lots of conversations around.
No, and I like that, and it tees up to what I was going to say. What the business has really to understand is it's a new challenge, new frontier, and legacy thought processes on IT infrastructure has got to go away. And the fact that the power at the top of these companies have to understand that, and then have to engage with this whole new kind of digitization strategy. I know, Michelle, good integrations and good data is music to your ears. How do you see this trend going forward? I guess your encouragement for this trend going forward.
Yeah, sure. And we've also benefited from working together doing this, and to build systems that talk to our back end will speak to yours, and we'll be able to move data around to be able to do something very easy for businesses, which is help them comply with reporting simply by bringing in good spec data. And so I can't see how this will go away. And I think years ago, people were concerned about their my data. I've done this, I've collected it, I've put my effort in, you can't touch it, you can't see it. But that isn't going to be the way moving forward. People will need to find ways to share information around, because exactly as Pratik said, these requests for data that are coming up now are coming up all the time. And we're only going to see that increase. And so businesses need to be able to connect through themselves and through external partners to be able to get the best of any type of data landscape. And I can't see that going away anytime.
No, thank you, Michelle. And I think that this really ties the kind of trends together. We have to have, as Mike said, that good structured data period to run any sort of intelligence or any sort of change methodology on top of through integrations, and that will help with EPR, PPR, all these new kind of regs and expectations. And then it will help us mature product as we go forward and understand that. And so if you jump to 24, Kennedy, as we're kind of wrapping up today, I picked one for each, but it doesn't mean everybody can't elaborate on other ones that may be near and dear to them. But Mike, I thought maybe you could talk about looking forward in 26, and you've talked a little bit about it, but just topic number one, leveraging AI and streamlining data. What's your predictions for 26?
If you think about being AI hesitant, experimenting and scaling, I think almost all companies will be in the scaling bucket as we get to the second half of 2026, in and around that picture that we were just looking at. Lots of experiments going on. All COOs, CIOs are asking for AI ideas. They're well past, the evaluation stage.
That's great. And Pratik, I picked number 2 for you: bold, strong data foundations to action advanced technologies, because I know it's an area you're certainly involved in. So your thoughts on 26? On your mute, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I think that as we look forward, this is no longer a optional area. This is not something that is optional to do. It has already become really important. And looking forward, I would say it's almost becoming mandatory. The one thing I would say with that is, my mindset is very much of being action oriented. And I think that the thought I'd like to leave everybody with on this particular topic is, look, nobody's perfect today. Nobody has perfect data that's accurate and complete. And so the real task of order of the thing that needs to be done is to take action. And even just on today's call, there's 3 different resources that they can reach out to that have done this before, that are knowledgeable, and that can help them figure out what's the right way for them to move forward. So on this particular topic, the call is for action.
Great. And obviously, Michelle, I'm going to come to you number 3, but sustainability matters, especially EPR, PPR. 26, what's your forward look?
Me? EPR? Well, the big story is, of course, there are going to be 7 reports going in now on the 31st of May, or at least 6, maybe 7th going in. And so companies who have already maybe struggled with what they've done this year have to be considering how they can pull that data together in a more automated, more systemized, more simplified way, so that they can get ready for that. Because the quick fire, let's get this done, that was probably the 2025 story for EPR, now needs to turn to business process and become business as usual.
No, I love it. That leads well into number 4, building a connected, visible supply chain to stay proactive. It's an area that I'm obviously very passionate about, and how the world should operate. I think 26 is hopefully going to be the year of action. We pontificated, the industry has for years, and really have, I feel the transition from just reporting to actually changing business structuring. So I think you're going to see a lot more good stories come out of 26 and how companies are adapting and changing to this. As we wrap up, can we jump to 26, Kennedy? I'd love to, kind of all ties into a great promotion for Summit, which is coming up here in just a few weeks as we come into the new year. Again, the whole concept of Summit is to bring together thought leaders like we have today, but obviously a lot broader group. Everybody on the call today will be there. And this is really an area to hear from a majority of industry leaders, thought leaders, understanding how to accomplish today's task. I will tell you, it's a rapid-paced session with a lot of content around it. And before I hand off to closing to each individual, Mike, anything else on Summit before I do a closing?
No, we have a ton of resources. Pratik, Michelle, Specright, a lot of opportunity for one-to-one engagement as well. So look forward to seeing folks there.
Great. So if you haven't registered yet, please do so. I think if you go back a slide, Kennedy, it'd be great as we kind of let everybody say goodbye. We had time for question and answer because I think we had a really dynamic discussion, and I appreciate everybody's time right prior to the holidays. And I know we're all busy kind of wrapping up. But as we mentioned at the top of this, is please reach out to us individually. I'm going to let everybody kind of give their closing comments, but certainly I'm available for any sort of questions around the broader subjects, and excited to engage. Mike, how would people get a hold of you, and how would you reach out to them?
Email. There's also folks within Specright that many of you have relationships with that we can also get on the phone and talk with. So anytime we can touch base on your business priorities and how you get the most out of Specright.
And go to Pratik, same kind of closing. How would people get a hold of you and engage?
I encourage everybody to reach out on LinkedIn or email me or go to our website and reach out that way. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me. Wishing everybody a happy holiday and a very successful 2026. Thank
you, Pratik. Michelle?
Yes, drop to our website and you'll see we have loads of blogs about topics to do with EPR if you are in any way unsure about that terminology which we've been using through this call today. And you can get hold of myself and get hold of the rest of our team there. And yes, thank you so much for having me today. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Thank you. And I'll say the same and hand it back to Kennedy.
Awesome. Thank you all. And thank you everyone who was able to join our webinar today. I know 2026 planning is well underway, and all these topics are definitely things that everyone is prioritizing. Again, feel free to reach out to our speakers after this. We will also be following up with the recording to this webinar and some additional resources, including more information about registering for Summit, where we will be talking in much more depth about all these topics. And again, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Stay well, everybody.